Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by Citrix GoToMeeting. Meeting is believing. Visit gotomeeting.com and use a promo code TWIST to begin your free 30-day trial. And by SnapTerms. Online legal protection made simple. Visit snapterms.com and enter the code TWIST to receive 10% off. And by AWS Activate, the Amazon Web Services startup program. It's easy to start and scale your business with AWS. Visit aws.amazon.com/activate.
Hey everybody, today on the program, it's a very special episode. I have the co-founder of Reddit, Steve Huffman, on the program. Steve is a brilliant guy, and he was the one who built the community at Reddit, and he gets very open, and because it's almost 10 years later, and tells me all the little secrets and tips and tricks they did to build that community, including having 100 aliases to create the content on the homepage when nobody would come to it. And then he tells me about all the lessons he learned, and then starting his next company, Hipmunk, which is in the travel space. And he's got a lot of battle scars and a lot of knowledge. And he's one of those people who is just so honest. It's so refreshing. And it's going to be one of those interviews that will become one of the 10 classics out of the 500 episodes or so we've done of This Week in Startups. I can tell you that because in the audience at this scale conference we did, he received well over a 9.x in terms of the ratings. We ask everybody to rate the talks. And this is literally the highest rated talk of the event, and you're going to love it. Please enjoy Steve Huffman, co-founder of Reddit and founder of Hipmunk.
That's what it's all about, man. They said, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey, let's give it up one time for Brandon here, standing up. He curated the whole event, which basically means he came to me with stuff, and I said, not good enough, not good enough, make it better. But he came to me with a lot of great stuff, and I was really excited when he came to me with this next speaker. That's a segue there. Steve Huffman, who is, as you probably know, the co-founder of a little site called Reddit, which started as this tiny little Y Combinator project, kind of a failure, and people predicted its failure many times, and it just kept going and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and just when you thought it couldn't get any bigger, it got bigger, and now it's just ridiculously huge and an independent company, and he's doing a really fascinating company called Hipmunk. Anybody here ever try Hipmunk? Who's tried Hipmunk? Wow, we got a hometown audience here. And he's really just a really considered, honest, and insightful guy, so please welcome Steve Huffman. What's that? Oh, timer's dead? Okay, so you'll just give me the 5-10. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm well. We had a great conversation a week or so ago.
Yeah, let's see if we can do it again.
Yeah, let's see if we can do it again. But in all seriousness, Reddit has become such an amazing phenomenon. Could you ever have imagined, I don't know if it's 10 years yet.
9.
9 years.
Coming up on 10.
So could you have ever imagined it would have been a cultural phenomenon that I think tens of millions, I don't know if it's over 100 million yet, touch a month?
No, not even close. In 2005, when we started, my wildest dreams were in November we'd still be in business. But that's not even true because we didn't think of it as a business. I didn't want my parents to be right when they were telling me to get a real job, and I didn't want to look stupid in front of Paul Graham. That was
the two main motivators of most entrepreneurs.
I think the fear of failure is a really important motivator, as long as it motivates you to do something rather than to do nothing.
Right, because it can cause, and you've probably seen this with fellow entrepreneurs, paralysis.
Yes.
But you guys didn't crack under it. You just got creative.
We did, yeah. When Reddit wasn't working, we just pretended it was, and we pretended to the world that it was. We submitted a lot of the content. Most of the content on Reddit was fake for the first few months. And
unpack that for a minute, because when people hear that, it's an incredible admission from somebody as successful as yourself.
Explain exactly what faked means.
Okay, so it was real content, right? But it all came from Alexis and I. Alexis was my co-founder. So we knew, like, intuitively, and also from Paul Graham, who was our first investor, that websites, especially websites like ours, they should feel alive. It's a community, it's a living thing. You want to feel like you're a part of something. And so it was never acceptable that the front page be empty, or as I'd say at the time, the front page would dry up, because we wouldn't allow links that were more than 24 hours old. So over the course of the day, links would just disappear if you didn't keep filling it up. So we had all sorts of tools for scraping all these new sites and our competitor sites, and then allowing Alexis and I to easily make up a username and then submit the whole thing as a new user. And if that account already existed, it would automatically log us in as that account and submit it. It was like this very complicated web of lies. Whenever I would vote, it would randomly add like bazillions of points, or I guess at the time like 6, between 6 and 15 points or whatever, to make it look like there's just more than just me clicking around.
It's kind of like when your friends call and they're like, hey, how's the party? And you're like, this party's awesome.
Yeah, turn up the music. It's like,
yeah, you're like,
great.
oh my God, hold on, I can't hear you. You got to get your ass over here.
That's exactly what it was like. And I remember very clearly, it was a day in August where I had something else to do that day. And my habit was usually I'd get up in the morning, submit a bunch of stuff to Reddit, restart it if it was broken, and then work. And then before
reboot the website.
Bed,
sure.
Yeah. Oh, it used to crash all the time. And then when I go to bed, I would do the same thing, submit a bunch of content that would last the evening. And that day I was distracted with something, I don't remember what exactly, but I got up, I didn't do anything, and just before I went to bed, I checked Reddit, and the front page was full. And I didn't recognize a single username on the front page. And that was a really, really exciting moment, because it meant that we had real users, and this thing was even temporarily working on its own. And that's when it switched in my head that this is a real thing.
Yeah, and that sort of pufferfish strategy, appearing bigger than you are, we've heard a couple times during this, even for enterprise companies, like making the website, like Tout was a company of one person, and TK was like, yeah, we made it look like it was a huge company, and I would respond as like a different person as the salesperson,
Yeah, I think that's really important, because people want to trust and believe in something big, not something small necessarily.
All right, everybody, this is an easy read for me to do because Citrix GoToMeeting is one of my favorite products in the world. If you're trying to keep up with your workload and you're constantly out of the office for meetings, it can all seem so impossible, doesn't it? And that's why millions of professionals are using Citrix GoToMeeting. You can meet with clients, coworkers, new prospects. You don't have to leave your desk, and it will save you a ton of time, and you're going to get a ton of work done. With GoToMeeting, you can meet with anyone from your computer, your tablet, your smartphone. You can talk face-to-face with them with this beautiful, awesome HD video conferencing, and I suggest upgrading your camera here. That's what I do on my laptops and everything. I have the nice Logitech HD cameras, and they do 1080p, and it's absolutely stunningly gorgeous, and you can share screens. I was just on a screen share with my designer at inside.com, and he was making notes on stuff, and he records the call sometimes so he can remember what I said if he has to go back. And you can schedule these meetings in advance or on the fly, which means on my schedule, there's just a link that says, hey, the meeting is scheduled. Click this link, and you don't have to do any of these. Click, and you're in the meeting. So all the meetings start on time. Or you can just say, hey, go to GoToMeeting and put in this 9-digit code. And it's just like you read the number over the phone. Or you send them the link. It's so easy. No travel time, no travel expense. It just allows you to work smarter and more efficiently and take more control of your time and resources. And it's just one of those products that's very transformative, and it works. Don't use free products. They always break down and don't work and have low fidelity. You want to use a really great product with a dedicated bandwidth and network for it, and that's what GoToMeeting is. Beautiful, awesome product. Thanks so much at Citrix at GoToMeeting, and let's get back to this amazing program.
And when did Reddit hit its first major scale point in your mind, and how did it come about? Because we've spent now a day and a half talking about scaling, and it seems like these things come from unexpected places typically. I'm wondering if yours was deliberate or unexpected.
Well, I mean, there's so many of them because we were so bad at scaling that even a small website seemed unwieldy to me. Right. I remember the day we launched Reddit. So Paul had emailed me and was, Like, hey, when are you going to get this damn thing online? I don't think like you're even capable of doing it. So it's a very snarky email. And I was like, fine, look, here it is. And I sent him a link that actually pointed at my laptop. And then he like wrote a blog post and linked to it. And so from that point on, we're on. And this like poor little website's running off my like MacBook Pro.
So he pushed you out of the net, literally.
Yes. And I guess we've been falling and learning how to fly ever since.
Yeah.
But Reddit has been like, I think, a constant scaling battle since day one.
Yeah.
Just my entire time there, because so many times I had this feeling of, okay, I can get us some more speed, I can get us up a little bit longer, I can make this a little bit more stable, but this is the last trick. This is the last thing I can cache. This is the last thing I can preload. Like, this is the last thing I can fake. I've got nothing else up my sleeves. And the next week, find something else, and the next week, find something else. And it was like that for years, basically.
And is there a point at which it ever feels like in a startup like that that's growing at scale, does it ever feel stable? Does it ever feel normal? Does it ever feel predictable?
When it does, that's a problem. I've looked back on those moments, both on Reddit and Hipmunk, whether it's like technology scaling or people scaling or whatever. And I look back and I think, oh yeah, we're in a good place. We've got enough engineers, things are up, things are fast, this is great. And the next week I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, we need people, we're down, we're slow, we've got this and that. And like, I've never regretted having that thought of comfort.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it comes over you naturally, and now when I feel it, I just think, what am I missing? What am I missing?
And it's not paranoia, it's an alertness, you'd say, as an entrepreneur?
I think it's just like this trained response, like a discomfort, because I've been burned so many times by my own comfort.
Right. So just don't ever feel safe in life is the best advice.
I think so. It's not that bad.
Thank you for coming to Scale.
Always be looking a step ahead, even when you don't know which step it's going to be. You should at least have one in mind.
So there are many things you know about running a community at scale that very few people in the world know, because you've run the largest community ever built. I would say Reddit is undeniably the largest and most sustained online community ever built. I mean, is there any community bigger?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, Wikipedia but it's not really a community. There's no comments, so I don't actually consider it a community.
In the sense that this is like a place where people hang out, I think Reddit is definitely the largest.
It's definitely the largest. And so you moderated and grew, because you were the super god mod, right?
Yep.
What did you call yourself? The God King? Was it like a...
I just called myself an admin, I think.
Yeah.
Superman. Oh, what was the term? There was a term that our accounts had special super duper privileges.
And what did you have to do to keep that community on the rails and from spiraling out of control?
It changed over the years. In the early days, we didn't really have an ethos. We didn't. We kind of agreed, hey, we're not going to ban content because it feels icky, and we don't want to have to make that sort of judgment about things. But I would still ban content from time to time based on my own personal feelings. Like, this is spam, I will ban you. This is racism or homophobia. Those were kind of two issues where I just didn't have any tolerance for. And as we grew, it became harder and harder, because both Reddit's voice became louder, and I felt less and less comfortable me personally having any say and anybody having any say, but all of a sudden people cared about it a lot more. So in the early days, it was a lot easier because my voice carried a lot of weight, and so did the voice of my 100 accounts. And so I could
It was more like a choir in a way.
Yes, exactly. So I could control the conversation on a lot of issues.
You could be like, I'm banning you because this is inappropriate, and then 10 of your friends would be like, it is, +1.
Yeah, well, very rarely would we actually ban people outright. I called it neutering them. It was one of the first features that we built in. The community calls it shadow banning now. I don't know if they still do that. I mean, we put a lot of effort into it. It's basically removing somebody so they didn't know they were removed. Because it was an arms race. And if somebody knew how I caught them, this is mostly in the case of spammers, they would just find a new way to spam us. But if they kept doing the same thing over and over, I could just, write a little function to catch that behavior and
So if I'm a spammer and I'm submitting spam stories, you can say neuter, and then I can still submit stories, but nobody sees my activity.
Correct.
But I see my activity.
Yep, you'd see activity.
Which makes a person go mental. And these are probably mentally ill people to begin with.
People would get very, very
You're a cruel man.
belligerent when they'd figure it out.
I mean, you're basically fucking with them.
Yeah, well, they had it coming.
They did, they're spammers.
They're fucking with me, like they started it.
and that, folks, is Reddit in a nutshell. But it did sort of spiral in that way, but it was effective.
It worked
at the
very
end of the
well,
day.
especially when we were very naive about how to catch users. Right? We
Yeah.
didn't have the sophistication we have now is much, much better. But back then, it was really very simple heuristics.
Yeah. And what made the community, we talked about going off the rails, what made it, really soar? Like, what were some of the things that you're very proud of? Because the community has done great work.
It has. And I think what we did intuitively, in hindsight was correct, but we didn't know at the time, was Reddit had a very authentic, both like coming from Alexis and I, the founders, very authentic voice, and then the content on the site was very authentic because we did not want to remove things. So people knew they could badmouth Reddit, they could badmouth me, they could express their political views freely, or whatever, distasteful porn, whatever it was. And there are so few places, I think, in society, let alone online, that where that is true. And I think that people appreciate that. And when you let people be honest, I think they are overwhelmingly good. There are certainly bad things, but it builds a platform on which people can do really magnificent things as well.
And some of those magnificent things come to mind, like...
I know we've saved many lives because we've paid for people's treatments that they were otherwise going to not get those treatments.
Like literally the community got together, gave gold, gave donations, and...
Bought homes, gotten people off the street, helped businesses, saved families, saved whales, all sorts of really cool things.
It's almost like the community delights in seeing what they're capable of doing at this point, to me.
Yeah, it's as a spectator now.
Yeah.
I'm no more closer to Reddit than you are, really.
Right.
It's amusing. I think people. It's like when you give somebody a gift, and I've only had this feeling as an adult. I think because I'm a terrible gift giver, right? And when I have an idea for a gift and I can give it to somebody and they appreciate it, it's such an amazing feeling. And Redditors do that all the time. I don't know if any individual one does it all the time, but there's so many people thinking that way. And then you can kind of collectively take credit for it. It's like, oh, I'm part of this subreddit or whatever. I was part of this conversation. I had a hand in that. Accurately or not, I think it's this really positive feedback loop for people. And, and I think it's a good thing, too. It's a good way to feel, and it makes people feel good about themselves.
And you were using pseudonyms and allowing handles, and Facebook came along and said, hey, ixnay on the handles. We're not going to do that. And things did, after you left, I think, get pushed to a level of, let's exactly see how far we can push this anonymity thing.
Yep.
Let's talk about that, because there was one person who went kind of off the walls, and I think you had to manage him, but I know Gawker eventually doxed him. Dox is the term, right? Doxing is releasing people's documents, basically giving their address. So they doxed him.
This was Violent Acres.
Violent Acres was his handle.
It was his handle. I forget his real name. Yes, that was one of the darker times in Reddit.
I mean, he was an adult man, right?
He was an adult male. Yeah. When I was there, he managed a lot of the NSFW Reddits, a lot of the porn Reddits. And he managed one in particular called Jailbait, which was basically legal but distasteful pictures of young women. And we knew it was there, and it was frustrating because I must have banned and unbanned Violent Acres probably a dozen times over the years, where wherever we drew the line of acceptable behavior, he would walk right up to it and kind of stick his nose over. And the challenge with him was basically exactly that. He was always pushing the boundaries. And we had basically an agreement because he did something for us that I had no interest in doing, which was he policed child porn. I didn't want to click on those Reddits. I didn't want to click on those links. I didn't want to have anything to do with that.
You don't want to see it, yeah. I mean,
and I knew people. Well, I shouldn't say no. I didn't want I didn't want to have anything to do with those Reddits, and he would moderate. So our kind of implicit agreement was: you ban these things, you keep the illegal content off, and you can have your little playground. And that worked fine for a while until the story blew up. CNN got a hold of this, started this witch hunt. Gawker got a hold of him, exposed him, and the story, I think, really took a disappointing direction because now there was a large number of actually evil people hearing about Reddit for the first time as a place where I can go and find this type of content. So it actually brought that community.
It was a
to
marketing
Reddit.
campaign for them.
Basically.
Yeah.
Like very Streisand effect, the sort of thing like.
Explain the Streisand effect.
Streisand effect is like, I want to keep something quiet, but if I make a big deal about it, like if I'm trying to hide something, it makes it a bigger and bigger deal.
So if I try to get those pictures taken down.
Exactly. If I try to ruin this guy, all of a sudden he's going to become very popular, and there's actually a lot of people like him or even worse out there. And so this was after I had left where Reddit had to deal with all of this. And I think they did a pretty decent job given the position they're in, which is they're like, well, we have no choice. We have to ban it all. And so they fought that battle. It's kind of a Pyrrhic victory. You can never win that. That content's all back there, I'm sure. It's just hiding again, as it does online. But those are like very tricky moral decisions. Especially when somebody's not breaking the law and you don't want to impose your personal judgment on what other people are saying and doing.
Right.
And that, I think that kind of goes with the territory.
If you're going to run an open community, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest challenges I think Reddit has to face on a continuous basis.
And you sold it to Condé Nast, which is the most unlikely person to own it. And they owned it during this Violent Acres period. And they also owned it during the 420 scandal when I guess people were advertising. Yeah. Or they told the advertising group, you can't advertise any pot-related bongs or whatever. And that was a whole brouhaha. And then every single user on Reddit changed their avatar to a pot leaf.
You would think, look, Condé was great to us.
The check cleared.
The check cleared. They were great to me. I learned a lot while I was there. I matured a lot while I was there. But sometimes, like for a media company that's been around the block so many times, they would just do the darndest things. Especially when it comes to like the whole Streisand effect stuff. I had so many arguments. The best one, the best story of all was the Sears debacle. This was right at the end of my tenure. There was the Sears.com website had this bug where you would go to a page for a particular product, and the product's name would be on the page and also in the URL. But the name in the page would come from the URL. So for example, if you go to this page for a grill that said, Weber grill, that's what it would show on the page. But if you change the title to Weber baby cooker, which is what some Redditor did, the page would show a grill and it would say Weber baby cooker. And the problem was if you were the first person to visit this page, that's how it would be cached. So then later on, if you visit it through the legitimate link, it would still say Weber baby cooker. So somebody found this bug.
Fun with caching.
Yes, right. Somebody found this bug, submitted it to Reddit. It was the top link on Reddit. I didn't know Sears was selling baby cookers, something like that. But Sears was an advertiser on Condé at the time. And so the president of Condé is calling me and basically saying, you have to take this down. And I was like, no. And we argued all day.
Who doesn't have a baby griller?
It's like, first of all, it's clearly a joke.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's in good humor, and they're going to fix it. It's not our fault. They have a bug. If I take this link down, there's going to be another one. We argued over the course of the day. By the end of the day, I was also like, and third of all, the website's fixed. The bug doesn't exist anymore. This is a link to nothing. She was like, take it down. And basically implying that I was going to be fired if I didn't do this. And it was, I regret this decision to this day. I was about to leave Reddit. My contract was expiring. And I had made up my mind, because there's a series of bullshit things like this, that I'm going to leave. I'm tired of these people. I thought they were like threatening me personally, my livelihood. So I was like, fine, I took it down. But I had my little revenge, my last moment of immaturity, where I PM'd the submitter of that post. I was like, just give me a call on my personal number. He gave me a call. I was like, hey, Steve, I have to take your post down. I'm really sorry. I would like you to make a big stink about this on the site, because I threatened Conde that this would happen if this post came down.
Something to be helpful.
And he was like, yeah, sure, man, no problem. And so, and so I did. I banned his content.
Shenanigans.
And he submitted this post. He's like, what the hell is Reddit censoring my content, blah, 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 blah. And it turned into this huge story. Bigger
Reddit censoring.
than the Sears thing ever was.
2 words that just
Like Wired,
well.
Wired was our sister company under Conde. They got 15,000 phone calls in the next couple of hours. They had to change phone numbers. It was just this huge mess. And the story became bigger than it ever was going to be before. And so I was just like, you know what, fuck you guys. So.
Hey, if your website doesn't have a proper terms of service or privacy policy, you are risking costly litigation. Snap Terms is a simple, affordable, fast way to protect your website. And there are these ambulance chasing law firms that look for internet companies, especially ones that raise a little angel funding, and they just try to go after them because they didn't have their terms of service up. And they say, you don't have your terms of service up, when they throw a lawsuit at you. You do not want to risk this. And if you go to snapterms.com, you can get started for only $299. That's right. It's super efficient. It's super easy. And you just fill out the form and you get a great terms of service. And they have custom solutions for more complex businesses. So if you're into crowdfunding or e-commerce or community stuff or content, they're going to tailor it right to you. Each of the sections will be about the different things you collect and what you do and what you don't do. Go ahead and use the promo code TWIST to get 10% off your order. It's an amazing product. Go ahead and use the promo code TWIST at snapterms.com. Just stop what you're doing today. Take the time to protect yourself. It's only $299. Super simple, super easy. Have a terms of service on your website. Take business seriously. Do not get yourself sued. Do not lose your business because you didn't check that box. You need to have a great terms of service, and Snap Terms is the easiest way to do that. Go ahead and check out snapterms.com. Use the promo code TWIST for 10% off. And you can check out ours, thisweekinstartups.com/legal. They're funny, too. All right, let's get back to this amazing episode.
Look, let's talk a little bit about how the internet has evolved, and you, I think, have some concerns of the sort of playfulness of Reddit to what has now become, hey, let's just try somebody, let's catch somebody, try them, fry them, execute them online as quick as possible and destroy their lives.
Yeah.
It seems to be like a huge pattern on Twitter and other places.
It's really, the internet has made a lot of things easier, a lot of good things easier, communication, the spread of ideas and knowledge, but it's also made the verdicts against people very efficient, and the pitchfork wielding, groups. I feel like people are getting, lynched online without.
They're scaling it.
Yeah, it's crucified in the court of public opinion at a much faster rate than they ever could be before, and I think that's very, very scary. Reddit stance is, of course, no names and addresses anymore. They just will not be posted. They'll be banned immediately. But even if the evidence is overwhelming, it's like people have committed suicide over this. They've been killed over this. It's such a scary thing to me, even if it's somebody I don't like, that we don't allow due process to run its course.
Right.
And I know there are very cynical responses to that, because I've had them myself. It's like, oh, the cops don't care, the judicial system doesn't work. But because it doesn't work sometimes in practice doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to use it. Because, it does work in practice many, many times, right? Even though it's failed every once in a while. It's certainly Reddit or any other online community isn't going to do a better job.
Right.
And I think that is a very deep belief that I have, that I hope, I think we're getting there. I think people are starting to learn that this is not an acceptable way to behave. It's very scary sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the catch a predator instance was kind of mind-blowing.
And it's tough because you're always put in this weird position.
You're like, pedophile kills himself, you're kind of net positive, right, for the world.
And I don't like defending pedophiles, right?
Right.
But I feel like that's the more dilemma people often face.
Right.
I had a case.
A guy ran off the show to catch a predator, went back to his house and killed himself.
Yeah. Before it
feels like a positive for society. In one way, feels like, oh my God, is the media somehow,
Yeah. That we didn't need the TV show to punish him, right? They had already caught him.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't need to publicize the whole thing. I had a case similar to that on Reddit. Actually, not similar to that, but they started this hoax. Reddit was mad at AT&T, so they started this hoax that the CEO was dead. And news organizations started picking it up, and his family started hearing about it. And I banned it. I banned that story, and people kept submitting it, and I banned it, and I was putting my name on it. I was like, I'm banning this shit every time I see it, because you are like upsetting people in a way that I don't think is trolly and amusing anymore.
Right.
And I think that those, every once in a while, we have to kind of draw the line over what's acceptable behavior.
And I'm curious your thoughts with, and we'll get to Hipmunk next, and this is fascinating, what your thoughts are on groups like Anonymous and then also 4chan. Two things that I think were kind of born out of, the Reddit sort of legacy.
Well, to be fair, 4chan was around before Reddit. We'll give them their credit. They invented the troll and perfected it. I was going to claim Reddit perfected it, but no, we made it mainstream. But they,
you made it a hit.
Yeah. No, 4chan and Anonymous. I mean, they are what they are. I've never been a committed member of either, although their hijinks are well documented. I think it's a sign of things to come, where people can have organizations that don't know, geographical boundaries. And while I don't often agree with Anonymous's politics, I think it's so asinine for somebody to provoke them. What's hey bear, what's going on?
Yeah, these are an effective group of individuals.
Yeah, and they get things done, and sometimes it's required, and I think that's a good thing. Sometimes it's reactionary, but I think all in all, it's probably a force of net good because it causes people to think twice about whatever they're doing.
I almost kind of feel like they're like some weird group of awesome, and I don't want to promote vigilantism, but they do serve this kind of purpose of they seem to be really optimized for doing the right thing.
And that's the scary thing.
Some kind of effective way.
Yeah, but it contradicts exactly what I was saying 5 minutes ago.
Right.
Which is they are vigilantes, and
they just happen to be batting well.
And unfortunately, I have no control whether they exist or not, so my opinion is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what my opinion is, honestly. Because sometimes they do things I agree with, and other times they do things I don't. And would the world be a better place if there was more of them? I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to have some sort of checks and balances.
Yeah. All right, let's go over to Hipmunk. You had a tremendous success with Reddit. You did well for yourself, and just what an incredible legacy to have built one of the largest sites in the world and the biggest community in the world. Then you decide, hey, I'm going to take another swing at bat and be an entrepreneur, found another company, and that's Hipmunk. Mm-hmm. Tell us why you chose the travel space and what you were trying to accomplish and what you've learned so far.
Well, so I'll start with what I was trying to accomplish, which was I wanted to build a actual business, and I wanted to solve this problem that makes people very angry. But I did not choose travel. It was my co-founder. He really, really wanted to do travel. And I, at the time, this was in 2010, was telling him, this is a terrible idea. Travel is the most hostile space possible. We can do whatever we want. I know people. I've got connections. I understand the game better now. Why would we choose the most difficult thing possible? And he was like, well, it's a pretty big market. And that's not really doing him justice. He was the reigning North American debate champion at the time. So he wins a lot of these arguments. But we thought very naively at the time, our competitors now, but the people in travel space are asleep at the wheel. I hate using their product. I have to use them all the time. It makes me mad. It's not a feeling I want to have. Like, we can do better. And so it was very simple. We can do better. We can build a real business. And in the back of my mind, actually, I told Adam privately, I thought we'd be out of business in 3 months anyway, and then we can work on whatever I wanted to work on. But 3 months later, we were launching, had a very successful launch, and we've grown and grown since then. So it's been quite an adventure. I've learned. I went into Hipmunk thinking I can take everything I've learned at Reddit, the hard way, and just apply it to Hipmunk, and I will be so effective. And
how'd that go?
Poorly. Reddit and Hipmunk have nothing in common. I have learned an entirely new set of lessons. So my third startup is going to be the shit. I'm telling you, it's going to be great. But at Hipmunk, we've had to learn so many lessons.
They both have charming little,
the mascots.
Mascots.
Well, Alexis did both of those.
Yeah. So there's something in common.
He's got a lot of talents, and one of them is making
mascots.
Very charming mascots. Well, I have a 30-second story on that because I think it's somewhat relevant. I was in a startup competition with somebody once at South by, and it was Hipmunk and his company, and the 3 finalists were on stage, and they were basically going to surprise, in third place and second place and first place. Third place was somebody else, and me and this guy, we knew each other, we were acquaintances, somewhat it's kind of a one-way rivalry. I just didn't really give a shit. And when they announced second place, which was his company, he was muttered under his breath on stage, "We can't all have cute mascots." And I was like, you know what, fuck you. We can all have cute mascots. There's no rule that says you can't have a cute mascot. So what if it gives us an unfair advantage? Make your own damn mascot. Why are you getting mad at me? It's just God.
It's a good takeaway in a way. It's you can have an awesome mascot.
Yeah.
I really want to know who that is now. You can tell me backstage. One-way rivalry. So you started with the agony of booking flights. You made a beautiful interface. And
thank you.
And it was delightful. Did people come? Did they use it? Was it enough to make something that was a beautiful product, that was exceptionally well-designed?
In a little sense. When we launched, there was a lot of people, frequent travelers, who appreciated us. The press loved us, because the press are often frequent travelers.
Yeah.
But Hipmunk is not social. It's not viral. It's not something you use every day. It's something you use once or twice a year. And so growing beyond that first chunk of users has been very, very difficult. We are getting better at it now, but Reddit we had no marketing. We didn't even collect email addresses when you signed up. And so the process of learning how to market at Hipmunk and how to have a message and how to reach people who aren't clones of myself, I'm sure many of you have gone through that and probably know more about that than I do.
Yeah.
That's been the painful lessons for us to learn over the years.
Yeah. And people weren't converting. They would use your site to...
and then they go buy the flight on United.com.
So they'd be like, thank you for giving me the flight number. This has been a delightful interface. I will now give the commission to somebody else.
Yeah, and we've learned that we can run ads for those users, and it works great.
So you're basically use our interface, but if you're going to use one of these airlines, they're all in the navigation bar. Click them, and Mazel Tov will take our commission that way.
It works out just fine. Flights is not a great business anyway. And
hotels is the big business, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Well, hotels aren't perpetually going out of business.
That helps.
And they don't have astronomical fuel costs. Yeah. And they aren't short-sighted and idiots. So,
right.
They're just
and bailed out by the government.
Yeah, right. They're not overly regulated.
The government liked to announce the bailout of the Four Seasons and Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah, right.
It's you never hear that statement.
So hotels are much easier to work with because they're just healthier businesses. Their margins are massive, and they'll happily give some of that to us.
And it's a huge chunk of change, 20%, 30%, I hear. Yeah, so you book a hotel room, it works really well. So what's worked for you guys in terms of bookings and hotels, and what have you learned in terms of growth?
The big thing, mobile is huge. Both just the general trend of people going from the web to mobile. I mean, it's obvious everybody has felt that. That has been very kind to us. Mobile is growing very, very quickly at Hipmunk. And then the use case, I guess you've heard from Sam at Hotel Tonight, the use case of booking hotels last minute is consumers are growing more and more comfortable with that. So We have all of the last minute hotels and all of those rates, and that's like a use case that really only makes sense on mobile.
Yeah.
So that's been a lot of fun.
And is there a strategy in paid that you've tried, and is it possible to arbitrage and use paid techniques? Because that's something that obviously Reddit, I mean...
Reddit never bought traffic or SEO or anything. Yes, it's definitely possible, but the question is for how long and at what scale. SEM is very painful for us because we're competing against Priceline, Kayak, people who have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend per year on that sort of thing, and are more efficient businesses than we are. So they just, it's tough to compete there. But we can invest more time in smaller channels and all the new Facebook stuff, and any new channel we'll try out, max it out, and do pretty well there for a while. So for us, it's a little bit more legwork of finding and optimizing these things before the big guys catch wind of it.
Right.
But I think that's pretty common in all businesses.
It's sort of like the half-life of marketing, right? Like this platform, new Facebook app installs comes out, like, oh, it's super cheap. Uh-oh, the big boys found out about it, now it's not. Oh, Twitter installs.
And that's okay, and that story is very, very common, right? The smaller, nimbler companies can do that sort of thing. They can afford to because they don't have anything to lose, and they have to.
Yeah.
But the big companies cannot afford to take experiments like that.
Right.
So, nor do they have the bandwidth or the creativity or whatever is required. So that's the world we live in now, and that's fine.
Yeah. And in terms of the ultimate sort of outcome for Hipmunk, what's your hope with the company? I mean, do you look at it now and say, like, hey, we can become a full-service travel company? Like, you have these huge players around you, or more content, or more, like specific with bookings?
We just launched our partnership with Yelp on Tuesday. We're powering hotel bookings on Yelp now. We're launching announcing another big partner next Tuesday. And over the course of the last year, I've been more and more like, I believe in my core that we can IPO one day. Like, I don't see any obstacles in our way other than ourselves.
Right.
And I haven't always believed that at Hipmunk. And it's fun and terrifying at the same time, right? It's that same fear of failure. Like, I believe we can do this. I feel like there's no excuse other than our own screw-ups to prevent us from doing so. Therefore, like, we better get it together.
Right.
But it's like Adam said, it's a big market, and there's not a lot of people in front of us.
And you have to, those partnerships, that seems like a key, huh? Partnerships can really jumpstart and build the brand.
It's a good way for us to grow.
Yeah.
Because as I was saying, the paid marketing is challenging. But we've got a great BD team. We've got a great product. Other people in the industry want to be associated with our brand. And so that works out very well for us. So we can play on our strong suits.
So Yelp would be like, hotels.com, meh. But I know Hipmunk's got some real...
Precisely. I mean, they're 2 blocks away. We're like-minded people. We're friends, in general.
Yeah.
And so those are deals that we can get that the big boys can't.
Right. And they're optimizing for a fun, unique user experience, I would bet.
Exactly.
Yelp.
Yeah, our philosophies are aligned in that regard.
Great. Let's take some questions from the audience. I'm sure people have a ton of questions. And
so Linus Torvalds asked about voting rings.
It's not really Linus Torvalds.
What's up?
Okay, keep going.
Got it. Voting rings and mass voting and how you dealt with that.
Sure. So this was basically the big project of Reddit's first employee and Hipmunk's second employee, this fellow, Chris Slow, whose coattails I've been riding quietly for years. And on Reddit, it is hideously complex. But basically, every time you vote, we keep track of everybody else who's voted on similar things. And so we have this basically dynamic voting ring detector. And so if you are voting on something and somebody else in that ring votes on it, their vote just doesn't count. And so we put a lot of effort into building up those rings in real time, cutting out votes, and then making it impossible, nearly impossible to detect whether or not your vote counted at the time when you voted. It's easy to tell in hindsight, but at that point it's too late. That story's already become stale. So there's basically a huge in-memory graph of all the active Reddit users, what they're voting on, what they voted on in the past, and how they relate to one another. And so you can be a normal user of Reddit, do your voting, everything counts and works, and then you email your buddy, hey, would you upvote this for me? And none of those votes count. and then you won't know it for about 4 or 5 hours. And that's a big, Reddit's open source except for the code that's not, and that's about that's about half of Reddit's code base is that technology.
Got it. Another question?
Got it, yeah.
Any questions from Sergey Brin or Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah. Got one from Obama.
Okay, let's get the Obama.
There's no feedback button on Reddit. Why is that?
And who asked the question is a good one.
Who asked
Go
the
ahead.
question?
So
It was the same.
Why is there no feedback button on Reddit? I'm not there anymore. I didn't need people to tell me where Reddit was broken or how it could be better. Like, our list was so long that was okay, thanks for the hot tip, It's an arrogant thought, but I mean, that's how I felt. Like,
Your website is not responsive on mobile.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. First of all, Reddit's the website sucks. But that's not why people are there, right? They're there for the content and the community.
You never had a designer as such to doing the website. It looked like eBay, right? It was just like tables.
Never. Oh, we copied Delicious.
Yeah.
It's like we just straight up copied Delicious. Reddit is very utilitarian. So I have gotten a lot. If I was at Reddit now, I think it would be a lot different. I've gotten a lot better about product and have worked with people who are really, really good at that sort of thing. At Hipmunk, Hipmunk, I think is much, much prettier than Reddit and works very, very well. And that's just kind of the evolution of us learning how to do things. But we get very little feedback from users. We watch users. We see what they do. We just don't listen to what they say.
Yeah. Another question?
Question around anonymity and how that was kind of decided and whether you think things would have been changed on Reddit.
So it was never decided. It was just something we did out of convenience and then stuck to over time as we realized we liked it. Would things be different without that? I mean, of course. I think the fact that you can create as many users as you want with as many different usernames. I never went through any effort to ban that because I thought it was amusing. First of all, then the first 2 users of Reddit each had 100 accounts. So that kind of set the tone. But I think that kind of semi-anonymity, it's less anonymous than 4chan where there are no usernames. There's still a name and a history associated with everybody and a personality.
Right.
But there's not a real life persona. And that's important to Reddit. It doesn't work everywhere, but it was important to us.
Okay, raise your hand if you have a question. Take some from the real space or from the chat room. Here we go, question.
How you doing? I'm Nick Haas from Loot.
Right in the microphone, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm Nick Haas from Loot. I had a question. I'm a big fan of yours and everything like that. I was kind of curious, what new technology right now are you really excited about? Seeing that you've got a pretty unique perspective on things.
That question's for Steve, by the way.
So the question is, what new technology am I really excited about? I love Uber and the eventual self-driving car and that whole wave of services. I think that's really, really exciting, especially being a prisoner in San Francisco. What else?
How soon do you think that's going to be here?
Sooner than you think.
Yeah.
Sooner than you think. I think Uber, especially in major cities, is changing the way people feel about car ownership.
Right.
And the self-driving stuff, I think, like all aspects of computing, will be here before we would anticipate because things always change faster than we anticipate.
Yeah.
The fact that we all have smartphones in our pocket and 7 years ago it was a joke, it's how fast things can turn around.
Yeah, Trio 650,
Right?
Yeah.
So I think it'll be here very, very soon.
I mean, that D announcement from Elon Musk last week.
Right.
I mean,
When you
I
have
ordered
a company
one. It's
like that
it's coming in December, I think, or January.
They're shipping in December.
Yeah.
And that came out of nowhere. And who knows what they're working on now. And,
Yeah.
And so I just think that's such an exciting space. And it's going to change the world, particularly in the United States, because we're such a driving culture, in a very profound way.
What do you think it's going to be? I mean, aside from not owning a car and not having that expense, what do you think it will have on, what impact on society? You free up a lot of hours of time, people can commute more?
A lot of time and stress will go away. Our cities will be much more livable. We won't have to dedicate so much space to road infrastructure. We don't have to dedicate, there's just so much we have to do in terms of maintaining roads and traffic police and traffic deaths and signage and all this stuff that can all just go away. Commuting, all of a sudden, people will be so much more productive because they don't have to spend. You don't have to spend 2 hours a day, like concentrating on driving. People will not be miserable. Maybe they have to spend 2 hours a day in a car, but at least you can be reading or talking or watching TV or whatever it is, something that's not inducing road rage. I think that's such a drain on the American psyche right now. It's the fact that on average, people have to drive like an hour or 2 hours a day, something like that.
Yeah.
We're very privileged living in a city where we don't have to deal with that.
No, I mean, depression and divorce rates correlate with length of commute.
Exactly. So if we can alleviate that stress, that seems like a wonderful win for us.
Great. Final question from the audience.
Wanted to ask to expand on, you said that you didn't have a feedback button because you already know about, like, there's already a huge bug, so you didn't need people to tell you about them again. Did you have a distinction between functionality bugs or usability bugs? Like, was it like you always fight with scale or fix usability problems as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not referring to bugs, right? On Reddit, it's very easy to have feature ideas because, we spent half our days using Reddit, doing QA. But like, we were on the site, like Chris used to make these graphs of like the most active users on Reddit. And it was a pretty standard like power distribution. And there was one guy all the way at the very end who used Reddit like more than anybody else. And that was me. So like, I knew all of those issues. Some, like, we didn't have time to solve, or some I didn't have an idea of how to solve, or some I just didn't agree were actual problems. And I think, I'm trying to think of an example of, like reposts is a great one. People are always like, why don't you do something about the reposts? It'd be so easy to write a feature. Oh, you guys are so stupid. You're incapable of writing a feature to eliminate reposts. And I'm like, I like reposts. Like, I think it's important. Like, so, pound sand. Like, I'm not doing it. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, like I ruled from a very arrogant position. But I think that's where I think some of the authenticity I think was coming from, is that all of the developers of Reddit were big Reddit users as well. Also, we were like really young and arrogant and not very good at product. And so,
how much do you use Reddit today?
On and off. I deleted it from my phone last week because I found myself just wasting an hour every morning, an hour every night. And so I go through this about once a year where I'll delete Reddit for a couple of months. I'm starting to feel that itch to reinstall it because people talk about things and I don't know what they're talking about. But I also have a lot more time in my day and I don't I don't get in the shower angry about what I just read. So
a little Reddit fast is good for the soul.
I think so. Yeah, I installed Reddit and Facebook, and it's nice. I think everybody should do that from time to time. But I'll probably be back.
Last night at dinner, we did the thing where you just stack all your phones, and first one to touch pays. Amazing dinner.
We do that all the time. What's hilarious though is you got to get somebody to text one of your buddies about 10 minutes after you do that, so they're like, have this like itch.
Some itch to like just keep calling. And that's why you have a backup piece.
Yes, but we do that a lot, and I think
piece.
that is very, very important. The phone stack.
The phone stack is critical. Mm-hmm. And you were the first class of Reddit of
YC.
YC.
Yep. It was 2005. We were there with Sam Altman, who's now the CEO of YC. Justin and Emmett, the founders of Twitch, were in that batch.
And you were an investor in Twitch.
I was not an investor in Twitch.
Sorry.
Sorry,
I didn't mean to bring that up.
We sold Reddit. They're my best friends. We sold Reddit.
Your best friends, so you had an opportunity to invest then.
Okay, well,
I mean, multiple opportunities to invest.
So yes, many, right? So their first startup wasn't Justin TV, Twitch. It was Keynote, this calendar thing, which they sold on eBay, which it was a really funny story at the time. They started Justin TV just as I moved out here because of the Reddit acquisition. And so I was like the first rich friend. And they were like, Steve, do you want to invest in Justin TV? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to have that kind of relationship with my friends. I don't know how to spend money. I didn't. And that was stupid. Obviously stupid. And Justin used to bring it up all the time. And now it's funny because my investment thesis is the exact opposite. I only invest in friends.
It's so funny because at the same time, I went through the same thing after selling Weblogs Inc. And Evan Williams showed me Twitter, and I was like, this is inane and stupid. You got rid of the blog post and you left the headline.
Yeah.
And then Mark showed me a poker game and said, do you think games on Facebook be big? And I was like, no, nobody's going to play for virtual chips. That's stupid, Mark Pincus. So I passed on investing in both of those. And then Travis was like, hey, look, you can get a cab. And I was like, good, can I invest in that? And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
It's cab, it's cab. I don't, lawnmower, cab, I don't care.
I tell myself, like, I miss an amazing investment every day, and that's just life.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I get a few good ones.
Yeah.
So.
And tell us about Sam Altman. He's kind of a mystery man. He did this company Looped, I guess.
Yeah.
It didn't do very well. It went sideways for a long time.
Well, Sam was funny. In 2005 in Y Combinator, he was young, first of all. He was like 19. Him and I didn't get along particularly well. Not particularly bad either, but there was a bit of a rivalry there, I think, with our respective kind of positions in YC. And he was the only one who knew the game. When Paul and YC were giving advice, like, don't raise money from VCs, like, he was in Palo Alto raising money from Sequoia.
Yeah.
Like, I've never actually asked him this. I should, because he knew how startups worked and how that ecosystem worked long before anybody else did, long before Paul did. And he, to a large degree, I think, helped shape Paul's vision for what YC would become. He was a big player in that, and I think that's why.
Brilliant guy.
Very, very, very smart.
Yeah, amazing poker player.
Very smart. His company Looped was way ahead of its time. It was see where your friends are on a map on your phone before smartphones, before apps.
Yeah.
So there was a need, but there wasn't the infrastructure yet.
Yeah, I mean,
so
way ahead of its time.
So yeah, Looped did, well enough. I think they paid their investors back, and Sam, but Sam like really knows his stuff, and he always did. And that, especially because at the time I was 21, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about anything, and the people I looked up to didn't know anything either.
Yeah.
So that was startling, and I think that's why he's in the position he is now.
Yeah. You think they're going to launch in New York? Alexis maybe run a New York YC?
Because
he's in New York.
It's plausible, but I imagine they'll launch. If they're going to launch in New York, they'll launch in a European city first.
Yeah, London or Berlin.
No, I'm not privy to those conversations right now, which is why I can speak about it. I imagine that makes a lot of sense. A lot of their applicants are from Europe, and just getting here is a big barrier.
Yeah, well, put it in Canada where like they let Europeans come as opposed to here.
So removing that barrier, I think.
All right, let's hear it for Steve Huffman. Amazing talk. And everybody check out Hipmunk. It's amazing.